Good afternoon. My name's Ryan and today I'll be discussing the question, will consumers keep paying more for original brands versus generic copy brands? To answer this question, I'll be contrasting the two forms of the product, discussing their quintessential differences, influences on the buying decision, why consumers buy original luxury brands to begin with, as well as the consideration of generic copy brands and their appeal in the market, intrinsic and extrinsic product values, as well as some primary research I've undertaken. To begin this discussion, I'll first define the two product types. Business Dictionary defines original or luxury products as products which are not necessary, but which tend to make life more pleasant for the consumer. In contrast with necessity goods, luxury goods are typically more costly and are often bought by individuals with higher disposable income or greater accumulated wealth than the average. To contrast this, Business Dictionary defines generic products as a good that is sold using the name of the type of the good that it is, rather than the brand name. A generic product is typically not heavily marketed and competes with other brand name products largely on a price basis. In many instances, generic or copied products share similar characteristics to their original counterparts. Similar packaging designs, features create a certain degree of curiosity when debating the purchase of the cheaper generic brand, or obviously splurging out and spending more on the expensive luxury item. In this case, if generic copy brands can produce similar looking, similarly designed products without the heavy price tag, then why do consumers still desire the expensive alternatives? Now, obviously, while researching for this discussion, I vaguely recalled a few good quotes from one of my favourite movies, and upon reviewing and noting down the quotes from the movie, I thought they provided an extremely raw yet extremely relevant perspective on how we act as consumers and why we buy the goods that we don't really need. The first quote being, "Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate, so we can buy shit we don't need." The second quote, "We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like." The movie where I found these two quotes, Fight Club. An excellent perspective on a consumer market. So, obviously, while I was constructing my discussion, I had a good think about these two quotes and what the real underlining message is, and it provided me a good foundation of where to go from here with my discussion, as well as taking, I guess, a bit of personal perspective into the discussion, and made me think personally why I tend to buy more expensive luxury items as opposed to generic. So to begin with, I basically did some standard research, just having a look at particular products and what's available on the market in terms of generic and luxury. In a personal context, I had a look at watches as an example. Now, I prefer to have luxury or Swiss watches, which obviously generally carry a high price tag, as opposed to basic, generic, standard watches. Now, using eBay as my primary source for information gathering on this one, I had a look at some basic cheap watches, and I was able to find quite a few. Now, in the pictures that you can see here, all of these watches look relatively nice, they're photographed well, and they present nicely. 12 watches in total there, and you would expect to pay a reasonable amount for all of them. However, you can have all of these watches for the one low price of $200. The average watch was between $15 to $30, so they're extremely cheap and they look quite nice. On the flip side, the alternative is Tag Heuer. This is a personal favourite brand of mine. I own two of their watches and they're absolutely beautiful. Taking the personal context out of it, it's just a watch. It does have more expensive movements, which are Swiss made, but quintessentially it tells time. Contrasting between the two, you can either own 12 watches or own this one. However, this one will carry a heavier price tag. $10,500. So 12 watches, one watch, buy a new car, have 12 watches. Yeah, weigh up the pros and cons. So the next thing I did was obviously take a look into the reasons why consumers would tend to side at looking at the Tag Heuer watch as a more viable option in terms of luxury and desirability. The main influences that I looked at were really directed at celebrities. Obviously a few familiar faces there. They're all sporting a Tag Heuer watch. And this obviously creates a persona that by owning one of these watches, you now fit into an elite group of people. And I think this has a lot of appeal with the higher end watches. Celebrities really do yield a significant influence on the way we perceive product value. A lot of celebrities are now endorsing products and obviously promoting them as well, and this is a huge driving force behind the product's success. The representation of the product can be both black and white, and what I mean by that is it could just be an advertisement for a product that includes a celebrity, or they can be, in a sense, subliminally embedded into their works, for example, in music video clips. And I found an excellent example of this. It's a Jennifer Lopez video. I'm going to show you a segment of that now. So just pay a close attention to the first few seconds. You'll notice a few little things here and there. First thing you note, she checks the time with her ice watch, followed by her messages from Pitbull sent to her Nokia phone. And finally her Swarovski crystal sunglasses. So considering that, what are the other reasons consumers buy luxury goods? For pleasure, for one, the sheer enjoyment of owning an expensive item and the actual process of acquiring that item. For example, obviously you need to save money, or you need to go on a nice shopping experience to go and acquire one of these goods, and that obviously entails pleasure or happiness in the process. Self-fulfillment, now I'll place this into the context of, for example, getting a promotion. You want to acknowledge your hard work, so you go and slash out on buying yourself a luxury item such as an expensive watch or an expensive handbag. Individualism, so creating a persona for yourself to stand out from the crowd by owning luxury items. Style, this is obviously following current trends, so keeping up to date and dressing appropriately to what fashion magazines are telling you what's in and what's not. Perceived value, so how you place value on a good or service. So if you buy a nice watch, you buy it for your perceived value. For example, you may believe that it gives you, I don't know, a greater social status, for example, which will tie into status later on, but also recognition. So when you're in public wearing your luxury items, you might bump into a few people that will acknowledge your new watch or your new handbag, etc. And touching base again on status, so creating a higher level of, I guess, a higher level of status in the social hierarchy. So you obviously believe that you're at a higher position than the person who doesn't own that luxury item. Next, discussing intrinsic versus extrinsic values. Now this can basically be narrowed down to needs versus wants. Now extrinsic values basically entail all unnecessary goods, I guess you would you would say, so money, fashion, gourmet food, cars, real estate, investment properties and jewellery. Now all these factors will attribute to intrinsic values, which are pleasure, happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment and success. So intrinsic are things basically that you can't buy, extrinsic are things that you can buy to try and achieve intrinsic values. Now lastly, I did undertake some primary research to see how consumers are currently behaving in the market. I did undertake 10 surveys. I don't have time to discuss all of those with you now, but please take a look at the document provided to see, obviously, the survey that was undertaken. And under the consumers surveyed, I asked people that I attend the gym with, ex-colleagues and family members. And as a result, I found that 80% were willing to pay more for original luxury items and 20% preferred to save and buy generic items. So, in answering the question, will consumers continue to pay more for luxury or original brands versus generic copy brands? Based off survey and personal experience, I would answer the question saying consumers will always continue to spend more to buy the original brands, basically culminating the experience had when purchasing the item, the euphoric feeling of owning a luxury good or item, and just the overall status that is yielded from owning those particular items. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to review my discussion today, and thank you for your time.